Hello and welcome to the PFF Live Q&A. I'm Doug Kyed, joined as always by Ari Meirov and Brad Spielberger. Ari, how are you doing today?
I'm doing really, really well, Doug and Brad. Great to see you guys again. I mean, we are going to be playing the final we're going to be at the halfway point by the end of tonight. And after seeing what happened on Sunday, I have no idea what to expect anymore. I felt just absolutely crazy right now.
Absolutely. Brad,
Yeah,
how are you doing?
yeah. The week of the underdog and the week of the upset, I think, would characterize this past Sunday for us. And big game tonight with the Bears at the Steelers. I think it'll be interesting to see how Justin Fields can hold up against that daunting Pittsburgh Steelers defensive front. He has been getting the ball out much quicker. Obviously need those playmakers to create some separation and get open against the Steelers, but should be a good game.
Absolutely. Let's get into the biggest conversation of the day, and that is the status of Odell Beckham Jr. He is going to be waived as of, from what we know today at 4 p.m. I think we're having some social media issues right now. I don't think that this went out on Twitter, so we might just have to pause for a minute, figure out what's going on here before we actually get into the Odell Beckham Jr. conversation, just so that we don't have to repeat ourselves again when everyone else joins the stream. Are we on top of this, Ari and Brad?
It's it's not working for some reason. There's an error, but I guess we could just pre-record it now and we'll go live on Twitter after. So let's just continue.
All right, let's keep going here. So yeah, like I said, Odell Beckham Jr. expected to be waived. That would process at 4 p.m. Eastern time. He would come with a $7.25 million salary. So there's only a limited amount of teams that it could actually put a claim on Odell Beckham Jr. His contract also reportedly was revised to chop off the last 2 years of his contract, 2022 and 2023. So, even if a team does want to claim him, they'd have a lot of cap space. There's not a lot of contending teams out there with a lot of cap space. And if a non-contender claimed him, then they would not have him in 2020 and 2022 and 2023. So I do probably expect him to pass through waivers. I know that there's a lot of people who follow me who are into the Patriots. I've seen a lot of people asking whether the Patriots are going to put a claim on Odell Beckham Jr. It would be extremely difficult for them to do that. Just so you guys know, I think they would have to restructure Devin McCourty's contract, kick money even further into the future. And if you remember, all of those contracts that they signed this offseason in free agency were extremely backloaded. So they're a team that already does not have a lot of cap space in the future. So I would personally expect him to pass through waivers. And some of the teams to watch out there would be the Seattle Seahawks, maybe the San Francisco 49ers, the New Orleans Saints, and then, like I said, maybe the Patriots. I basically asked someone who in the know if the Patriots would be willing to sign Odell Beckham Jr. And let's just say that I didn't get a no. And that's kind of what I was expecting was a no. So I'd say that the door is open possibly for the Patriots to have some interest if he does clear waivers. But Ari, what do you think winds up happening with Odell Beckham Jr.?
Well, it's been quite the ride for Odell, from the videos to the release happening on his birthday to some players wearing free Odell shirts on Sunday. I mean, it's been a crazy ride so far. So as you said, Doug, we'll find out tomorrow if a team decides to claim him off waivers. As you said, if he's claimed, he would be owed $7.2 million for the rest of the year, which is a large amount for a player who has star ability but has not really produced in a while. So it feels safe to say that he'll clear waivers. As you said, we'll know for sure tomorrow. From there is where it becomes really interesting, because he'll become a free agent for the first time in his career, and he basically gets to choose where he goes. He gets to choose the quarterback he plays with. He gets to choose the coach he plays for. And if you remember, when Odell was traded from the Giants to the Browns, he told the New York Post that he believes the Giants sent him out to Cleveland to die. So, well, here is your chance to go pick your spot. I'm curious to see if a team like Green Bay gets involved and continues to be aggressive. I think a team like Green Bay adding Odell there would, A, make Aaron Rodgers happy. B, I think it would put the Rodgers COVID story to the side a little bit. And three, if we all recall, Odell did that sit-down interview on ESPN back when he was with the Giants, and the rapper Lil Wayne was with him. And Lil Wayne is actually a Packers fan. So I think that's a very intriguing spot there, but we'll see what happens. I know there's some reports about Seattle. Russell Wilson is coming back this week, maybe try to make a playoff push. I think it'll be very interesting to see what he does when he gets to choose his own team if he clears waivers.
Yeah, I think there's a million different angles to look at this story, but it was a really interesting, situation for a lot of reasons. I think something that went under the radar was the fact that he asked for a trade this past offseason, has been kind of trying to get out for a while now. So as much as it seemed like this bubbled up out of nowhere, that isn't really the case internally. And I think that's probably the case in a lot of situations where we don't always know all the finer details. But I would also just think, like to point out that this is a unique situation. Odell Beckham Jr. sacrificed money that he did not need to do to get out of there. It was a really interesting and creative contract reworking by Andrew Berry, the GM in Cleveland, where a roster bonus of about $3 million would only get paid if he did get claimed, and that team would owe him the full $7.25 million he has remaining. Whereas if he clears waivers, which as we expect, Cleveland only be on the hook for about $4.25 million. So they essentially got a buyout, and got something in return for Odell Beckham Jr. leaving, which was very smart by them to do, because it's not, he didn't need to do that. And they kind of leveraged the fact that they could have made him more claimable, and made it so a team he did not want to go to could have picked him up on waivers, and they kind of used that to their advantage. So I thought that was a very creative and smart way to kind of get a win-win from both parties.
And I think that this situation is obviously interesting on a number of levels. Ari, you mentioned the Packers. I mentioned the Seahawks earlier, and Russell Wilson. The Seahawks just announced that Russell Wilson has been cleared for a full return. That came in a statement from his doctor, Dr. Steve Shin. So Russell Wilson will be returning in Week 10. But I think that this is a possible way to make inroads with a quarterback who might be a little bit disgruntled. And we saw, everything that happened with Aaron Rodgers over the offseason. It's kind of uncertain whether he will be back in Green Bay next season. Same thing with Russell Wilson. There were trade rumors all offseason about Russell Wilson. Jay Glazer recently said that those will percolate again this offseason. And this is just a way to potentially make your quarterback happy, whether that is Russell Wilson or Aaron Rodgers or someone else, to put yourself out there and acquire a top tier weapon and say, all right, we're going all in. We're going all in with you. Do you want us to do this? Okay, we'll go out and do this. And I don't know. I don't know if it winds up being one of those two teams that does wind up signing Odell Beckham Jr. I think a lot of this has to actually do a lot more with Odell even than it does with the teams that are interested in acquiring him, because he's really the one who gets to pick where he goes on the rest of this season. It's only 8 or 9 games, depending on where he signs. I'm going to say that everyone's probably going to be offering right around the same amount of money. And if it doesn't get up to a certain point, then he's not actually going to be, he's still going to be making that money from the Browns rather than this new team. So yeah, I know that I think that those teams that do have quarterbacks with interesting scenarios, like I said, the Seahawks and the Packers, it makes a lot of sense for them to try to sign him. And, if he does clear waivers, they could even sign him to a longer term deal. They could even try to lock him up for 2022 or 2023. And I guess that would be a real way to show your quarterback that you're willing to do this and go all in. The fit in both those places. With the Packers, he'd probably get a lot more opportunities than he would with the Seahawks, who already have DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. But it all depends on his relationship with those quarterbacks as well. But I'd say that this is beyond just where is Odell Beckham going to play. There's a lot of different layers to this situation.
For sure. And that's really what makes it so interesting. It's going to see really what he does, like we were saying right now. And of course, he first just has to clear waivers, and I think we all expect that to happen. But once it happens, I'm also just curious to see if he decides to take some time off. Like maybe give me another week, give me another 2 weeks, then I'll come in. But we've seen Russell Wilson do this in the past, where he tried to get a receiver to come. The Seahawks claimed Josh Gordon a couple of years ago. They were in on Antonio Brown last year, so he could very much be there in John Schneider's ear and say, "Hey, we got to get Odell here. Let's add him into this receiver group and let's try to make a comeback here and into the playoff race." Or the same could be happening in Green Bay as well. We know Brian Gutekunst and Aaron Rodgers, their relationship has to be repaired. I think they've been doing a pretty decent job up until now, but this will be another step forward if Aaron comes up and says, "Hey, let's add him to this mix," and they go out and add him. So there's a bunch of different angles we could take to this, like we've said over here, and it'll be interesting to see what happens here in the next couple of days.
Sure. Let's get into another interesting scenario from really the entire first half of the season, and that's the struggles of Chiefs quarterback Patrick Mahomes. And it's reached the point where we're now halfway through the season, and looking at the PFF quarterback grades, Patrick Mahomes is 24th in overall PFF grade. He's 23rd in PFF passing grade. These issues just aren't really going away at this point, which I think that I and probably everyone else as well expected this to only be a few week issue and for him to look like himself again. And that hasn't happened. And that's kind of led me to wonder, what is going on with Patrick Mahomes? Is there some sort of injury that we're not discussing? Is there something happening off the field that, he hasn't disclosed or that's kind of taking his mind off football? I started to kind of ask people around the NFL, what is going on with Patrick Mahomes? And I didn't get a real clear answer. The one thing that I did hear from a league source is just that, he is pressing a little bit. Defenses have changed their scheme to beat him. And it might just take some adjustment. And it's interesting that this took so long into his career for teams to really adjust to him. But I don't know. I think that is what we're seeing. I still think that there's probably a lack of weapons issue with the Chiefs. We all know that that's not going away unless they can somehow acquire Odell Beckham Jr. But I don't know. It's a situation, I think, to monitor if there is something beyond what I said and just the fact that he is pressing and that defenses have just adjusted to beat him a little bit better. Brad, what do you think is going on with Patrick Mahomes?
Yeah, I mean, he has a stretch of 5 games in a row now with a sub-70 PFF grade, which is the first time in his career. I couldn't even find a 3-game stretch where that was the case. So I know over the last 2 weeks, he also has 4 turnover-worthy throws to 0 big-time throws. And obviously, he had made some of those, risky plays before and had been susceptible at times to maybe almost turning the ball over. But the lack of big-time throws is obviously the number that stands out there. And I think, as you mentioned, we said it coming into the season, but it's showing itself every week. Only having Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce as your true receiving threats, teams have kind of figured out how to sustain that. They don't rush beyond 4 guys. They sit back in coverage. They play a lot of 2 high safeties, and they just kind of bracket Tyreek Hill and limit the explosive plays. He'll have 8 catches sometimes, but there are a bunch of speed outs for 6 yards, and they're not letting him beat them on those big explosive plays. And without that, they are a different offense. So, I still think not even pressing so much now. I think he's kind of in his head a little bit. And the Packers game, I mean, they're missing Jair Alexander, their top cornerback. They lost Kenny Clark for much of that game last night. Zadarius Smith hasn't played much of the season. I could go down the list of guys. Eric Stokes, their strong rookie corner, first-round pick who's been very good so far, missed some snaps, and he still was not really productive. So there's definitely more to it, and it's going to be interesting to see if they can right the ship with a very tough schedule the rest of the way.
Yeah. Ari, do you think there is something else going on, or do you think it is just, like I said, or basically what I heard, which is that pressing defense is changing to beat him?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not 100% sure exactly what's going on. Again, I mean, we know that last year Mahomes did have an injury, and they, for the most part, actually kept it pretty under wraps. But I think it's probably worth noting that the Chiefs have had a couple of things going their way as of late. First of all, of course, yesterday with Aaron Rodgers being out, that's a big plus. Mm-hmm. But in the rest of the division, everyone is over 500. But you look at Denver, they traded Von Miller. You look at the Raiders, they've had all these off-the-field stuff that is just entering the locker room. The Chargers, as much as we like them, they've had a little bit of a slump. I mean, yesterday they almost lost to Philadelphia. And if you look at their upcoming schedule, they have the Raiders, the divisional team. They have the Broncos. They have the Raiders. They have a bunch of divisional games coming up. So if they could just take advantage of those games, they'll be right back in it in that division, potentially back in first place. So I don't know what's going on with Mahomes. Something is clearly wrong over there. Maybe it is the defense. Maybe it's an injury. Maybe it's just the offensive line. He's still not in a rhythm with them 5 new guys. We don't know what it is, but whatever it is, they have an opportunity right now to get right back in it in the AFC West. And looking at their schedule, they have a real shot at doing that here in the next few weeks.
Absolutely. Let's stay on that Chiefs-Packers game. And, we all know what happened with Aaron Rodgers at this point, him testing positive, him going on the Pat McAfee show and explaining why he wasn't vaccinated and why he tested positive and everything. And I don't know, we can certainly get into that, but I would say that I mentioned this on last week's show. I think it was on Thursday's show, is that, this was our opportunity to see what Jordan Love could do as a starting quarterback. And I think that, if Jordan Love had played really well in that game, maybe there would have been a little bit more confidence heading forward if Green Bay does have to lose Aaron Rodgers next offseason, if he forces that issue and wants to go play in Denver or San Francisco or wherever else he wants to play. Jordan Love was not good in that game against the Kansas City Chiefs. And I could say with 99% certainty that if Aaron Rodgers was the quarterback in that game, that the Packers would have won it. And the Packers would now be in a better situation in 2021. So I think that that's one element, is that, Aaron Rodgers really did hurt his team, and who knows, maybe he would have tested positive even if he was vaccinated, but there was certainly a bigger chance for him to test positive being unvaccinated. But also just heading into this offseason, I don't think that you can, as the Packers organization, after Packers fans watch that game, after the rest of the NFL watch that game, I don't know if you can head into next season with Jordan Love as your starting quarterback, telling your fan base, telling everyone that you're trying to go all in and keep winning Super Bowls and everything. It almost would have been a better situation for the Packers if Jordan Love did not have to start a game this season, because then there still would have been that hope that he could be that, that next starting quarterback. And he certainly still could, but he struggled so much in that game that I think that there are now question marks about whether he would be ready to be a full-time NFL starting quarterback next season. Ari, what did you think of Jordan Love's performance and really what this means for the Packers moving forward?
No, the Jordan Love performance obviously was not great. There were a bunch of misses. I mean, as bad as it was, they were still kind of in the game at the end with
Absolutely.
like 4 minutes left, which is the crazy part about it. But, first career start at Arrowhead Stadium, the place is going crazy. And after a week where Aaron tests positive and the interview drops on Friday, where I know Matt LaFleur tried to downplay it as if, no one cares about it, the locker room is going to be fine. There's no way the locker room on the flight to Kansas City was not talking about this, and this was the whole big topic there. So it was a tough position for him to be in, and it's probably also worth mentioning that Aaron Rodgers, his first career start was also pretty bad in 2006. So, you can't judge a guy in his first start, but then again, this could potentially be his last start of the year. And if Aaron does decide to request a trade this offseason, which is part of the, agreement that the Packers had with him this past offseason, Doug, you're right. I mean, what do Packers fans tell their fans after seeing Jordan Love one game and seeing that type of performance? I think it creates another fascinating element into this whole Aaron Rodgers drama with the Packers. And what makes it more interesting is if the front office now feels like, hey, we really have to accommodate Aaron Rodgers as much as possible to make sure he sticks around for one more year. Could that possibly be a scenario that comes up over here? And I think it just goes right back to Odell Beckham Jr. And if Aaron wants him, the front office might just have to do it to keep him happy right now.
Yeah. I mean, we discussed last week how after Rodgers was announced out, the spread in that game moved a full touchdown, which is a huge move. And I think that was justified by Jordan Love's play. And as we've discussed, first start of his career, yes, he's a sophomore, but still, I mean, and I do think he showed a lot of athletic ability as to why he went first round. He can throw well on the move, but I mean, late and high on not almost every throw, but on a lot of his throws. And that Chiefs defense also has given up, 17 points to Daniel Jones and the Giants last week. Everyone has scored a little bit on them. They basically, the Packers didn't score until garbage time, essentially. Yeah. It wasn't really garbage time because the Chiefs, offense is struggling and only had 13 points. But yeah, so somehow Green Bay covered that spread there because Love was really just not strong at all. And it creates an interesting situation because you talk about the Rodgers component. I think the component that gets lost with Love is that unlike Rodgers in the past, the Packers have to make a decision on Jordan Love after next season. It'll be his third NFL season for the fifth-year option. And that's going to be a $25 million fully guaranteed decision. It's a huge decision. And so if they're now at a spot where they say, we don't want to see him start the full 2022 season, let's do whatever we can to keep Rodgers around, you kind of create multiple issues because then you're going to have one very bad start, or maybe he gets a couple others, but not a lot of body of work, and then you're making a really big decision. So it's going to be a fascinating offseason once again in Green Bay.
Staying on quarterbacks and relating to the fifth-year option, let's talk about Sam Darnold and the Carolina Panthers. He's really struggling as of late. He had one of his worst games of the season yesterday against the New England Patriots. And it actually raised some questions about whether the Panthers are going to continue starting Sam Darnold at quarterback. Head coach Matt Rule was asked about that today. So let's play that clip of Matt Rule on Sam Darnold.
Matt, if Sam is healthy, is he still your starter?
I'd have to see. To be honest with you, Joe, just because of everything he's gone through, I'd have to see him this week. I'd have to see him on Wednesday and see what does that healthy look like. I mean, I've seen Sam play well. I thought he played well last week. I go back to the first 3 games. I thought he played well. We've kind of been on this journey with him, helping him to get, to take the next step. Thought he took it last week, took a step back this week. Why we have to figure that out. So I think for me right now, I just have to figure out where he is. Is he okay to play this week? Is he cleared to play? And then if he is, what exactly does that look like before I do anything else?
So Matt Rule is absolutely correct. Sam Darnold did have an 85 overall grade last week. That dropped down to a 41.6 against the Patriots. He was 16 of 33, 172 yards, no touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Their other option would be PJ Walker, who's really a big question mark there as well. XFL star, but hasn't done anything really in the NFL up to this point. But the Panthers do have Sam Darnold under contract on that 5th-year option for 2022. So no matter what they do with him, whether they keep starting him throughout the season, whether they turn to PJ Walker, they have to find another quarterback this offseason, they're going to owe Sam Darnold, $18 million, I think it is. Brad, what is the
$18.8 million? Yep.
They're going to have to owe him that money next season regardless. So I don't know if there's a best answer to this question, but Brad, what do you think the Panthers should do with Sam Darnold moving forward?
Yeah, I think if you got to a point last year where you felt Teddy Bridgewater, and yes, he had some injuries as well, kind of a similar situation, but where you thought, okay, let's see what PJ Walker has to offer. I don't see how you're not at that point here as well with Sam Darnold. I mean, you have Robbie Anderson yelling at him on the sideline. Just kudos to Robbie Anderson for signing his extension before the season. He knew all too well what playing with Sam Darnold does to your stats, and he was smart to lock that deal in before Sam arrived. But yeah, I mean, PJ Walker had 1 start last year. He had a 66 grade with us. 24 of 34 for 258 yards. I mean, I don't see why you don't give him a shot and see what you have, especially if Darnold's not 100%. I get the financial investment in next year, but you're willing to kind of bite the bullet on Teddy Bridgewater in the same way. So again, I mean, if you are truly striving to find a reputable quarterback that can make some things happen in that NFC, I think you have to keep looking for options, because Darnold, the Jamie Collins interception, I don't even want to hold against him. It was one of the crazier interceptions I've seen, where Collins just jumped and immediately snagged it. You don't see a pick that close to the line, but the pick 6 to J.C. Jackson was not a good throw. And I thought he had a bunch of other just poor throws on the day. So I would put P.J. Walker in and see what you have.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see what the Panthers do. I mean, just based off that video, there's not much confidence right now in Sam Darnold there in Carolina. And let's just, it's important to mention, ever since David Tepper got there as the owner, they've been very aggressive at just trying to find the franchise quarterback who would take over this franchise. Let's just remember, David Tepper came from Pittsburgh, where they've had Ben Roethlisberger forever. He wants to find the guy who could be that person in Carolina. They tried to do Teddy Bridgewater, gave him a lot of money. It didn't work. They moved on. They brought in Sam Darnold, picked up the 5th-year option, overpaid for him in a trade. It's not working. It would not be a surprise at all if it keeps on heading in this direction, if they move on from him as well. And then looking into the offseason, I mean, we know they were in on Deshaun Watson. Not only do we know they were in on Deshaun Watson, they were in on several quarterbacks. Matthew Stafford, they offered their 1st-round pick. They offered a couple of picks for him. I mean, Sam Darnold is probably like their 4th option there when you include a couple of the quarterbacks in the draft as well. So, they are probably going to be looking for a quarterback once again this offseason if this is the trajectory that Sam Darnold goes in, and they're not scared to do that. I mean, other teams might say, we don't want to eat that money. David Tepper and the rest of this front office are perfectly fine with with swinging until they find the quarterback who could lead this team to where they want to be. I mean, they have a nucleus of pieces there when it comes to young players, whether it's on defense and on offense, but they just can't find the correct quarterback. And if Sam Darnold's not that guy, it would not be a surprise at all if they're looking once again this offseason.
Just 2 quick pieces of news from that Patriots-Panthers game as well. Ramondre Stevenson and Damien Harris both left the game with head injuries. I'm told that Ramondre Stevenson is fine. I heard that Damien Harris will be fine. So kind of an update status on both of those guys. There is some breaking news here. Tom Pelissero reported that Raiders are releasing their 1st-round cornerback, Damon Arnett. This doesn't come as a major surprise. Some videos surfaced over the weekend of Damon Arnett on social media, waving a gun around, making some threatening statements. And that's a pick that really has not worked out well at all for the Raiders. I know that he dealt with some off-field issues this offseason as well. He really wound up barely playing for the Raiders this season, but just another hit to the Raiders, off the field, they've dealt with a lot already this season, and it's going to be tough sledding for them moving forward. But I wouldn't say that this comes as a major surprise, and it probably won't affect them much at this point on the field by getting Damon Arnett out of their locker room.
Yeah, he's actually been on IR, so he hasn't actually played much regardless. But that video that did come out went viral over the weekend. If you haven't seen it, I mean, it's pretty much everywhere. It has over 1 million views on Twitter already. So it's basically everywhere. And once again, the Raiders are acting right away. It's the third time they've had a situation from John Gruden to Henry Ruggs and now Damon Arnett, and they're not going to waste time. They're going to move on. And they want to keep this locker room, together, and making this move happen right away is the right thing to do. And Arnett will go on waivers, will probably not get claimed, and we'll see what happens there with the legal stuff with him.
Yeah, Brad, cap-wise, I know that they already kind of had to deal with a cap situation with Henry Ruggs, but Damon Arnett's another player with guaranteed money on his contract. Do they even have the cap space without doing some sort of maneuvering to make this move?
It'll be really interesting to see. So with Ruggs, we can probably confirm now at this point that the Raiders were able to essentially void his future guarantees and may even look into the process of recouping signing bonus, which benefits you from a cash and cap perspective. Very hard to do, and they might, based on their comments, they may not even go that route with him and want to support him, but still, they're obviously not going to pay him, future salaries. So that was kind of a net zero cap move, and Arnett, will be interesting to see if they try to argue there was conduct detrimental or some other reason. Perhaps it was an injury settlement or something. I guess he probably wouldn't agree to that. But long story short, they may explore some options there. I would say it's not outside of the realm possibility that someone does go ahead and try to claim him. An underrated aspect of the rookie deals is even those top guys that do get the larger deals, a lot of it comes via signing bonus. So those deals are super cheap on the back end years. And yes, he hasn't been playing and was kind of a reach prospect in the first place. So maybe no one, takes that risk. But, I wouldn't put it at 0%. But as you said, long story short, this Raiders season just they cannot stop taking these hits. And there, of course, I think I say this every answer now. There's a lot of ways to look at this. But, this is a good football team now that has 3 first-round picks and arguably 4 with Jonathan Abram, that they just kind of threw away. And it's just so tough because if Clelin Ferrell is Josh Allen, who had a monster day against Josh Allen, right. And if you go back and have revisionist history, which of course you can do with everyone, but you make the huge Khalil Mack trade, Derek Carr now becomes an ascending really good player at quarterback, and then you're just taking these hits over and over again elsewhere. It's just kind of frustrating almost from just a fan of football perspective to wonder where they could be with just some average, draft picks in some of these spots.
Speaking of Josh Allen, let's just get into really quick at the end here some of the most shocking losses of Week 9. And I think that we could probably all agree that it is the Jaguars beating the Buffalo Bills 9-6 in Jacksonville. Really, one of the more amazing parts about that game is that it's not as if the Jaguars offense was on fire in that game. They only scored 9 points. They only kicked 3 field goals. It was the Bills who really couldn't get anything going. Jaguars defense played well. Josh Allen, the Jaguars defensive end, was really the star of the game, intercepting, sacking, recovering a fumble, all against Josh Allen, the Bills quarterback. But Ari, what was maybe, the second most shocking loss to you on Sunday?
It's easy to pick, the Jaguars and Bills, like you said, Doug, or even the Cowboys losing to the Broncos. But I'm going to go with more of a disappointing loss. And I'll go with the way the Vikings lost yesterday to the Ravens. They built a double-digit lead in Baltimore, and then they couldn't do anything offensively after. And it's mind-blowing for a team that has Justin Jefferson and a team that has Adam Thielen that Tyler Conklin, their tight end, had the same amount of catches yesterday as Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen had combined. They had chances to win that game. And if you wonder why a guy like, Stephon Diggs wanted out of Minnesota, that game yesterday is the perfect example as to why. It feels like Mike Zimmer, the head coach, and Clint Kubiak, the offensive coordinator, don't have much confidence in Kirk Cousins. And after yesterday's game, the Vikings have now had 5 games this season come down to the final play. They had Week 1 an overtime field goal lost in Cincinnati. Week 2, Greg Joseph missed that short field goal against Arizona. Week 5, they actually beat the Lions on a game-winning field goal. Week 6, they beat the Panthers on a game-winning touchdown in overtime. And then now this week on the Justin Tucker field goal in overtime. I'll say this much. There's some serious noise for the Vikings to make a change, whether it's on the coaching staff or the front office or both. They need to figure it out fast, and it's not getting any easier because they have the Chargers coming up next week and then the Packers after that. And, of course, Aaron Rodgers will be back for that game. So it's an interesting situation. But the way they've been losing these games, not just this year, but in previous years as well, it's disappointing. And yesterday was another scenario like that.
Yeah, I think with the Vikings as well. I mean, they're winning turnover battle. They're having these huge explosive chunk plays like a monster Dalvin Cook run. They had a big pass to Justin Jefferson. Like, they're even hitting a lot of these things that can swing games and can sway outcomes, and they're still just coming up short. So it's definitely tough, to watch in Minnesota because they could have a great record, but like you said, I mean, they're basically the first NFL team to have an 18-game season based on how many overtime games they played at this point.
Seriously.
But I think we should talk about Josh Allen. Everyone is making a big deal out of Patrick Mahomes, as they should be. Josh Allen's our 21st ranked quarterback as well. I mean, he has struggled. That Jaguars defense hasn't put up much of a fight against anyone all season long, really. And I thought, I mean, their offensive line did not play well. I thought there were a bunch of snaps late in the game where the right side of their offensive line just got destroyed. But nevertheless, you can't excuse 6 points, against the Jacksonville Jaguars, no matter if there's a couple, issues up front.
All right. Well, we will be back with you guys on Thursday during halftime of the Thursday night football game, and that will be on Twitter Spaces. So hopefully that link gets sent out on Twitter, but didn't work out quite as well for us on today's show. But yeah, like I said, we will be back on Thursday. We will be discussing everything that's gone on in the meantime, including that game, but also where Odell Beckham Jr. is landing, any injuries that occurred over the weekend. So until then, keep it on pff.com for all of your news and analysis. Follow Ari on Twitter at MySportsUpdate. Follow Brad on Twitter at PFF_Brad. And throw me a follow at Doug Kyed.